right, 36. August 1914, this arena-like earth with its horizon banking high into a coliseum when seen from not too far above. Faint, rattling sounds of the opening of boundaries, tawny formations slinking into the arena. Their crouchings and seizures and crunchings. August 13th, 1914, things that were gathering in the sky. They were seen by G.W. Atkins of Elstree, Hertz, and were seen again upon the 16th and 17th. September 9th, 1914, a host in the sky watched several hours by W.H. Stevenson. There were round appearances, but some of them were shaped like dumbbells. They were not seeds, snowflakes, insects, nor anything else that they should have been, according to Stevenson. He says that they were large bodies. October 10th, 1914, a ship that was seen in the sky, or an absolutely black spindle-shaped object crossing the sun. Seen at Manchester by Albert Buss. Its extraordinarily clear-cut outline was surrounded by a kind of halo, giving the impression of a ship plowing her way through the sea, throwing up white foamed waves with her prow. During the last few days, October 1914, we have been much tumbled up and down in our minds owing to a remarkable occurrence somewhat in the nature of Robinson Crusoe's encounter with the footprints in the sand. Our advance load has been attacked. An empty petroleum cask is found riddled with tiny holes, such as would be made by a charge or a shot. Now, a charge of shot is scarcely likely to materialize out of nowhere. No one is accustomed to associate the phenomenon with the presence of human beings. It is none of our doing. Then whose doing is it? We hit upon the wildest theories to account for it as we sit in the tent turning the mysterious object over and over. No beast of our acquaintance could make all those little round holes. What animal could even open its jaws so wide? And why should anybody take the trouble to make a target of our gear? Are the Eskimos about Eskimos with guns? There are no footprints to be seen. It could scarcely have been an animal. The whole thing is highly mysterious. January 31st, 1915, a symbolic-looking formation upon the moon, 6 or 7 white spots in lit row arranged like the Greek letter gamma. February 13th, 1915, Stape Island, Causian Archipelago. A lighthouse keeper complained to Captain W.F. Tyler, R.N., that a British warship had fired a projectile at the lighthouse, but no vessel had fired a shot, and it is said that the object must have been a meteor. In the middle of February 1915, the planet Venus was about 2 months and a half past inferior conjunction. If objects like navigating constructions were seen in the sky at this time, there may be an association, but I am turning against that association, feeling that it is harmful to our wider expression that extra-mundane vessels have been seen in the sky of this earth and that they come from regions at present unknown. The New York Tribune, February 15th, 1915, that at 10 p.m., February 14th, 3 airplanes had been seen to cross the St. Lawrence River near Morristown, New York, according to reports, but that in the opinion of the Dominion Police, nothing but fire balloons had been seen. It is said that 2 responsible residents had seen 2 of the objects cross the river between 8 and 8:30 p.m. and then return 5 hours later. In the Canadian Parliament, Sir Wilfrid Laurier had said that at 9 p.m. he had been called up by the mayor of Brockwell, telling him that 3 aeroplanes with powerful searchlights had crossed the St. Lawrence. The story is told in the New York Herald. Here it is said that according to the chief of police of Ogdensburg, New York, a farmer living 5 miles from Ogdensburg had reported having seen an airplane upon the 12th. Then it is said that the mystery had been solved, that while celebrating the 100th anniversary of peace between the United States and Canada, some young men of Morristown had sent up paper balloons, which had exploded in the sky after 9 p.m., night of the 14th, New York Times, that the objects had been seen first at Guanaco, Ontario. Here it is said that the balloon story is absurd. According to the Dominion Observatory, the wind was, at the time, blowing from the east and the objects had traveled toward the northeast. It is said that one of the objects had, for several minutes, turned a powerful searchlight upon the town of Brockwell. Upon December 11, 1915, Bernard Thomas of Glenorchy, Tasmania, saw a particularly bright spot upon the moon. It was on the north shore of the Mare Crisium and looked almost like a star. In Dr. Thomas's opinion, it was sunlight reflected from the rim of a small crater. The crater Picard is near the north shore of the Mare Crisium, and most of the illuminations near Picard have occurred several months from an opposition of Mars. In December 1915, another new formation upon the moon, reported from the Observatory of Paris, something like a black wall from the center to the ramparts of Aristillus. January 12, 1916, a shock in Cincinnati, Ohio. Buildings were shaken. The quake was from an explosion in the sky. Flashes were seen in the sky. February 9, 1916, opposition of Mars. In the English Mechanic 104-71, James Ferguson writes that someone had seen at 11 o'clock, night of July 31st, 1916, at Ballinasloe, Ireland, just such a moving thing, or just such a sailing, exploring thing as is now familiar in our records. For 15 minutes, it moved in a northwesterly direction. For 3/4 of an hour, it was stationary. Then it moved back to the point where first it had been seen, remaining visible until 4 o'clock in the morning. Whatever this object may have been, it left the sky at about the time that Venus appeared as a morning star in the sky at Ballinasloe, and resembles the occurrence of September 11, 1852, reported by Lord Wriothesley. Inferior conjunction of Venus was upon July 3, 1916. We have noticed that all occurrences that we somewhat reluctantly associate with nearness of Venus associate more with times of great brilliance, 5 weeks before and after inferior conjunction than with dates of conjunction. Somebody may demonstrate that at these times Venus comes closest to this Earth. October 10th, 1916, a reddish shadow that spread over part of the lunar crater Plato, reported from the Observatory of Florence, Italy. November 25th, 1916, about 25 bright flashes in rapid succession in the sky of Cardiff, Wales, according to Arthur Mee. Colonel Markwick writes in the journal BAA 27-188 that at 6:10 p.m., April 15, 1917, he had seen upon the sun a solitary spot different from all sunspots that he had seen in an experience of 43 years. Colonel Markwick had written to Mr. Maunder of the Greenwich Observatory and had been told that in photographs taken on the sun upon this day, one at 11:17 and another at 11:20 o'clock, there was no sign of a sunspot. July 4th, 1917, an eclipse of the sun, and an extraordinary luminous object said to have been a meteor in France. About 6:20 p.m. this day, there was an explosion over the town of Colby, Wisconsin, and a stone fell from the sky. August 29th, 1917, a luminous object that was seen moving upon the moon. February 21st, 1919, an intensely black line extending out from the lunar crater Lexel. Upon May 19th, 1919, while Harry Hawker was at sea, untraceable messages, meaningless in the languages of this earth, were picked up by wireless, according to dispatches in the newspapers. They were interpreted as the letters K, U, and J, and V, K, A, and J. In October 1913 occurred something that may not be so very mysterious because of nearness to the sea. One supposes that if extra-mundane vessels have sometimes come close to this earth, then sailing away terrestrial aeronauts may have occasionally left this earth or may have been seized and carried away from this earth. Upon the morning of October 13th, 1913, Albert Joule started to fly in his airplane from Hempstead Plains, Long Island, to Staten Island. The route that he expected to take was over Jamaica Bay, Brooklyn, Coney Island, and the Narrows. New York Times, October 14, 1913. That was the last seen or heard of him. He has been as completely lost as if he had evaporated into air. But as to the disappearance of Captain James, there are circumstances that do call for a special attention. New York Times, June 2nd, 1919, that Captain Mansell R. James was lost somewhere in Berkshire Hills upon his flight from Boston to Atlantic City, or rather upon the part of his route between Lee, Mass. And Mitchell Field, Long Island. He had left Lee upon May 29th. Over the Berkshires, or in the Berkshires, he had disappeared. According to later dispatches, searching parties had scoured the Berkshires without finding a trace of him. Upon June 4th, Army planes arrived and searched systematically. There was general excitement in this mystery of Captain James. Rewards were offered. All subscribers of the Southern New England Telephone Company were enlisted in a quest for news of any kind. Boy Scouts turned up. Up to this date of writing, there has been nothing but a confusion of newspaper dispatches. That two children had seen a plane about 13 miles north of Long Island Sound. The two men had seen a plane fall into the Hudson River near Poughkeepsie. That in a gully of Mount Riga near Millerton, New York, had been found the remains of a plane. The part of a plane had been washed ashore from Long Island South near Branford. The latest interest in the subject that I know of was in the summer of 1921. A heavy object was known to be at the bottom of the Hudson River near Poughkeepsie and was thought to be Captain James's plane. It was dredged up and found to be a log. For an extraordinary story of windows in Newark, New Jersey that were perforated by unfindable bullets, see New York Evening Telegram, September 19th, 1919, and the Newark Evening News. The occurrence is a counterpart of Mickelson's experience. The detonations at Reading were heard 7 years apart. Here it is not quite 7 years later, London Times, September 26, 1919, that upon September 25th, a shock had been felt at Reading, that inquiries had led to information of no known explosion near Reading. In the Times, October 14th, Mr. H.L. Hawkins writes that the shock was quite definitely an earthquake, but its origin was superficial, and that the shock was transmitted through the earth more than through the air. In the London Daily Chronicle, September 27th, Mr. Hawkins, having considered all suggestions that the shock was a subterranean earthquake, had written, however, as the whole thing terminated in a bump and a big bang without subsequent shaking of the ground, it points more to an explosion of a natural type in the air than to a real earthquake. And in the London Daily Mail, Mr. Hawkins is quoted that if the detonation were local, he would believe that it was an aerial explosion, meteoric. But if it were widespread, it would be considered an earthquake. And in the whole series of the Reading phenomena, this violent detonation was most distinctly local to Reading. Reading Observer, September 27th, 1919. The most probable explanation of the occurrence is that there was an explosion somewhere near enough to affect the town. Officials at the Greenwich Observatory were unable to throw any light on the matter and said that their instruments showed no signs of earth disturbance. It is said that the sound and shock were violent, and that in the residential parts of Reading, the streets were crowded with persons discussing the occurrence. There was a similar shock in Michigan, November 27, 1919. In many cities, persons rushed from their homes thinking that there had been an earthquake. But in Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan, a blinding glare was seen in the sky. Our acceptance is that this occurrence is upon a small scale of the type of many catastrophes in Italy and South America. For instance, when just such blinding glares have been seen in the sky, data of which have been suppressed by conventional scientists, or data of which have not impressed conventional scientists. English Mechanic 110-275 J.W. Scholes of Huddersfield writes that upon December 19, 1919, he saw near the lunar crater Littrow a very conspicuous black ink mark. Upon page 282, W.J. West of Ghostport writes that he had seen the mark upon the 7th of December. March 22nd, 1920, a light in the sky of this earth and an illumination upon the moon. That so close to this earth is the moon that illuminations known as auroral, often affect both this earth and the moon. July 20th and 21st and September 13th, 1920, dull rumbling sounds and quakes at Comrie, Perthshire. London Times, July 23rd and September 14th, 1920. According to a dispatch to the Los Angeles Times, clipping sent to me by Mr. L.A. Hopkins of Chicago, thunder and lightning and heavy rain in Portland, Oregon, July 21st, 1920. Objects falling from the sky, glistening white fragments that looked like bits of polished china. The explanation of the local weather bureau is that they may have been picked up by a whirlwind and carried to the district where they were found. The objection to the standardized explanation is the homogeneousness of the falling objects. How can one conceive of winds raging over some region covered with the usual great diversity of loose objects and substances, having a liking for little white stones, sorting over maybe a million black ones, green ones, white ones, and red ones to make the desired selection? One supposes that a storm brought to this earth fragments of a manufactured object, made of something like china from some other world. In the Literary Digest, September 2nd, 1921, is published a letter from Carl G. Goman of Detroit, Michigan. Upon the fall from the sky in southwest China, November 17th, of a substance that resembled blood, fell upon 3 villages close together and was said to have fallen somewhere else 40 miles away. The quantity was great. In one of the villages, the substance covered the ground completely. Mr. Goman accepts that this substance did fall from the sky because it was found upon roofs as well as upon the ground. He rejects the conventional red dust explanation because the spots did not dissolve in several subsequent rains. He says that anything like pollen is out of the question because at the time, nothing was in bloom. November 23rd, 1920. A correspondent writes to the English Mechanic 112-214 that he saw a shaft of light projecting from the moon, or a spot so bright that it appeared to project from the limb of the moon in the region of Furness. About January 1st, 1921, several irregular black objects that crossed the sun. To the Reverend William Ellison, they looked like pieces of burnt paper. July 25th, 1921, a loud report followed by a sharp tremor and a rumbling sound at Comrie. July 31st, 1921, a common indication of other lands from which come objects and substances to this earth, but our reluctance to bother with anything so ordinarily marvelous, because we have conceived of intenser times and furies of differences of potential between this earth and other worlds, torrents of dinosaurs in broad volumes that were streaked with lesser animals pouring from the sky with a foam of tusks and fangs enveloped in a bloody vapor that was falsely dramatized by the sun with rainbow mockery, or in terms of planetary emotions such as outpouring was the serenade of some other world to this earth. If poetry is imagery, and if a flow of images be solid poetry, such a recitation was in three-dimensional hyperbole that was probably seen or overheard or criticized in Mars and condemned for its extravagance in Jupiter. Some other world meeting this Earth, ransacking his solid imagination and uttering her living metaphors, singing a flood of mastodons, purring her butterflies, bellowing an adore of buffaloes, sailing away, sneaking up close to the planet Venus, murmuring her antelopes, or arcing his periphery and spitting horses at her. Poor degenerate times. Nowadays something comes close to this Earth and lisps little commonplaces to her. July 31st, 1921, a shower of little frogs that fell upon Anton Wagner's farm near Sterling, Connecticut. At sunset, August 7th, 1921, an unknown luminous object was seen near the sun at Mount Hamilton by an astronomer, Professor Campbell, and by one of those who may someday go out and set foot upon regions that are supposed not to be, by an aviator, Captain Rickenbacker. In the English Mechanic 114-211, another character in these fluttering vistas of the opening of the coming drama of extra geography, Colonel Marwick, a conventional astronomer and also a recorder of strange things, lists other observations upon this object. The earliest upon the 6th by Dr. Emmerich of Detroit. In the English Mechanic 114-241, H.P. Hollis, once upon a time, deliciously exact and positive, says something in commenting upon these observations that looks like a little weakness in exclusionism, because the old sourness in turning slightly shanky, that there are more wonderful things in the sky than we suspect, or that it is easy to be self-deceived. It is funny to read of an earthquake described in technical lingo and to have a datum that indicates that it was no earthquake at all, in the usual seismologic sense, but a concussion from an explosion in the sky. August 7th, 1921, a severe shock at New Canton, Virginia. See Bull Size Society American 11-197. Professor Stephen Taber's explanation that the shock had probably originated in the slate belt of Buckingham County, intensity about V on the RF scale. But then if it said that, according to the authorities of the McCormick Observatory, the concussion was from an explosion in the sky, the time is coming when nothing funny will be seen in this subject. If some day be accepted at least parts of the masses of data that I am now holding back until I can more fully develop them, that some of the greatest catastrophes that have devastated the face of this earth have been concussions from explosions in the sky, so repeating in a local sky weeks at a time, months sometimes, or intermittently for centuries, that fixed origins above the ravaged areas are indicated.